Let's move on. Let's go over to the NFC, the Saturday night game, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, NFC Divisional playoffs. New York Giants 9-7-1, 4-4 on the road. 10-7-1, I guess, 5-4 on the road, including that playoff victory over the Vikings. The Eagles are 14-3, 7-2 at home at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 40 Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, 6 miles per hour. Pinnacle opened this up with the Giants as 7-point dogs at -113. They're now at 7.5 at -115, so it's juiced. You can get that Eagles -7.5 at +102. From a total perspective, it opened up at 47.5. It's now up to 48.5. We take a look at the cash here. You have 62% of the tickets on the Giants and 79% of the cash. So they are in public road dog territory. 78% of the tickets and 87% of the cash on the over, and we're watching it go up. Spenny Penny Bombs is on the Giants +7.5. Giants coming off an impressive 31-24 victory at Minnesota. They're now 14-4 against the spread on the year. Daniel Jones was excellent. 24-35, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Also ran 17 times for 78 yards. So he became the first quarterback in NFL history to go for 300-plus yards passing, 2+ passing touchdowns, and 70-plus yards rushing. Isaiah Hodgins is just, stepping up when the season is most important. 8 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Slayton caught 4 for 88. Saquon Barkley ran 9 times for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. He caught 5 for 46. The Giants pass rush didn't record a sack, but they got 11 hits on Kirk Cousins. Azeez Ojulari got hurt in the second quarter and was ruled out at halftime. It sounds as if it was just a contusion, and he should be good to go. The Giants allowed 5.2 yards per rush attempt. That was the second worst in the NFL. They allowed 144.2 rush yards per game this year, and we know exactly what the Eagles want to do. The Eagles running backs have rushed for 10 or more yards on 13% of their carries this season. That's tied for third best in the NFL. The Giants have allowed 10-plus yards on 15.3% of carries to running backs this season. That's the second worst in the NFL. Having Adoree Jackson back is a big deal. And I almost think that, you have Adoree Jackson back, you have, Xavier McKinney back. And when the Eagles played the Giants twice this year, neither of those two were in the lineup. And then you have a real healthy pass rush now and a dangerous pass rush that's healthy. So their 31st, their defense was ranked 31st in Pro Football Focus's coverage grade during the regular season. But I don't know if I trust those numbers. Fabian Moreau is not good. He allowed a quarterback rating of 101.2. Darnay Holmes allowed 99.5 quarterback rating. Adoree Jackson, 74.3. I mean, he's such a step up in the secondary. The Eagles coming off their bye for being the number 1 seed in the NFC. They have failed to cover 4 straight games. Jalen Hurts been dealing with this shoulder injury. He did not look good in their Week 18 victory against the Giants backups. And in both of the games, as I said, Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson weren't out there against Hurts. The Eagles held Daniel Jones to 169 passing yards in their Week 14 matchup. That's 10 yards below their league-leading average of 179.8. But feels like Jones is just playing at a higher level now. That was just recent. That was Week 14. The Eagles' defense is dangerous. They sacked opposing quarterbacks on 11% of pass attempts this year. That's the best mark in the NFL. They allowed the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, but Daniel Jones did not run on them in Week 14. He was held to 26 yards. Philly allows 4.6 yards per carry this season. That's the 9th most in the NFL. So they do have some vulnerabilities. Their offensive line is so good, and we'll talk about the injury to Lane Johnson here in a second, but their offensive line second in Pro Football Focus's pass blocking efficiency at 89.7. They allowed the fewest sacks and quarterback hits in the NFL. That's 11 sacks and 9 quarterback hits, 625 dropbacks. So you have All-Pro Jason Kelce, and then Lane Johnson, who has a torn adductor in his groin, and he's pushed the surgery into the offseason. He's listed as questionable, but he will be on the field. He didn't allow a single quarterback hit during the regular season, but they're going to have their hands full with Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, and Kayvon Thibodeau. Josh Sweat being dealing with a neck injury, but he is good to go. Avonte Maddox, though, may not be good to go. Looks like we'll find out more when they put out. I mean, he's going to be on all the injury reports, but he's got a toe injury, and he may not be available to play. Take it away for us here, Andy. Giants, Eagles, NFC Divisional Playoffs.
Yeah, I don't. Just to address that right off the top, I don't think Maddox plays. That'd be a big help, obviously, but I think he was leaning towards being out.
Mm-hmm.
And I did look at like rushing yards per game given up to quarterbacks, but that's a super noisy stat based on like who did you play? Because there are some teams it's like, man, you played like one running quarterback the whole year. Like how are we supposed to grade this, from team to team? So tough to get a true glean on that. But the Eagles did have decent results against Daniel Jones. And God, I don't know, Giants fans, Daniel Jones stands are gonna hate me for this, but Daniel Jones isn't as good as what we saw last week. Like that was and you know what? Neither is Isaiah Hodgins. You look at his numbers. He has like 180 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Vikings in the 2 games he played him. Yeah, that's like his stat line for the other 8 games that he played. Like it was just a masterclass by Kafka. And you've seen this coming down the stretch. Was the teams, and I said this yesterday to someone. I said it's like, hey, you can tell who got the assignment. Hey, here's how you play the Vikings because they play a garbage zone. They're not that good. If you know how to beat this zone with, any receivers, honestly, you can just march down the field. This Vikings defense is actually abhorrent. It's not good. And just think about every time you saw Hodgins or any Richie James or any of those guys who are not big names catching the ball, they were wide open. It wasn't Daniel Jones throwing in contested coverage. These guys were just running, sitting down in these gaps in the zone and just getting huge chunks of yards. And it's a bad coverage unit outside of maybe Harrison Smith with what he does at safety, but Patrick Peterson has had some flash plays, but he doesn't grade out all that well a lot of times. He's kind of hit or miss, and he's old. So it was a game where the Giants honestly should have scored more points. Like I was a little disappointed they punted a few times. And so I don't think you see this good of an offense versus the Eagles. This is a much tougher defense. Minnesota's bad. Go look at like I said, the teams that got the assignment were a smart coaching staff like the Giants and Kafka and Dable, and then a couple teams down the stretch who know them very well, who'd played them already this year. Detroit, Green Bay, like the teams that knew what they were doing could just expose this defense. So I do want to give a lot of credit to the Giants. But at the same time, it's a much, much tougher test. It'll be another road game playing a team that is coming off their bye. It's well rested now. I don't understand if Jalen Hurts is fully healthy. He's off the injury report, but who knows? You don't have to disclose an injury if he's practicing in full. Like if he's practicing in full, you can just say he's fine. If there's something hampering him, I guess that's still a thing. I think the Philadelphia Eagles will run quite a bit. I think the Giants offense will look much worse than it did last week. And I'm playing this under. And I hate this too because, we saw that game where Philly really put it on them in the Meadowlands earlier in the year. But to your point, and you brought this up with the pieces in New York that not only weren't available for parts of the season in that secondary, but pieces in this front, in this pass rush for New York have gotten a lot better as the season's progressed. This pass rush is very good for the Giants all of a sudden. And like you said, Philly with some question marks up front. So I think the Giants pass rush is effective. I think their offense is less than effective compared to what we saw versus Minnesota. Philly runs the ball effectively, but that drains a lot of clock, and you end up with like a 24-20, 24-17 kind of game. So I'm on this under. I think this should be on the other side of 48. It's not the strongest play, but I did make this play at 48.5.
I get it. I get it.
There's nothing fun about taking an under with a team that just looks that good and then a team off a bye, but I think it's a titch high, and it's a divisional matchup. It's the third straight matchup for, two good teams. It feels like a cagey affair to me, and my numbers make it slightly too high.
Yeah, and it's not all 48.5. There's still some books hanging 48s, but this makes sense to me. We can get you an under 48.5 at minus 105 over at 5 dimes, and I like it. it just feels like if you were going to study the stats year long from these two football teams, then it would lead you towards an over. But the Giants' defense is stronger and healthier than they've been all year, and it's a huge difference from what we've seen. Their pass rush has become very strong, and of course, we talked about Adoree Jackson and McKinney back. So then you have an Eagles offense that isn't as strong as it's been all year. You have an offensive line that has some ailments. They're just not quite as dominant. I know that you're going to have Sweat back defensively, but I agree. I think the reason why it's been moving to the over is because of what everybody just saw with the Giants in Minnesota. And I think I like what you had to say about not to believe really what you've seen about the Giants. I think everything points that this is a smart move that you're on, and I'm very interested in it myself. Under 48.5 at minus 105. And
we'll see what Kafka's game plan looks like this week while he's taking Zoom calls for head coaching jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we have the public dog here, and we know what they've done this year, especially the public road dog. They put up terrible numbers, and right now everybody is on 61% of the tickets and 78% of the cash right now, with just under 15,000 tickets in. So
and there was, and it did get beat up a little to. I seen this go down to 7 at Chris, and then it got hit hard. It went 7.5 minus 15 hard. Like somebody was multi-clicking, and they were taking 25K on sides at that point. So, like somebody hit this hard at Philly minus 7 when I finally got down there. So that's probably looking like a pretty strong resistance point if it ever gets back down there again. Seems like it might just end up sitting around 7.5 at this point. And again, if you're a teaser, if you like a good teaser, your Kansas City minus 2, Philly minus 1.5 teaser, hashtag America's teaser. If that one hits, the books are going to take it in the shorts on teasers for the weekend, because that's just going to be the most common combination of all time.
Well, I like where you're at. I like this under 48.5. It's still 48 at Bet365. It's not something that I need to rush into, because who knows? I mean, it just keeps getting bet. It keeps moving to the over. Slatsy has a question. He says, can you ask Andy what his most important key number is when betting an under?
I mean, a lot of it depends on matchups, but you can look up, how certain teams play, how their tempo is in neutral game states. And then some of these too, you do have to look. It's like, how is this team's tempo in, a game state where they're trailing, in a game that they're a big underdog? Because, more often than not, probably like 60, 70% of the time, they are going to be trailing for chunks of that game. If you have a team, like I mentioned with, and Kansas City's kind of a piss poor example because they're such a good team. But like I said, if you have a team that just can kick tempo up when they're trailing, Tampa Bay last night was a good example, even though they didn't really get it done. But we've seen that when Tom Brady is maybe the best there's ever been at a 2-minute drill. Like when he has a team clicking and throwing down the field, that you see defensive timeouts all the time, where it's like, all right, uncle, they say, like, this guy is murdering us right now. We're going to give up a touchdown in the next 3 plays. We need a timeout because he's running a well-oiled machine. So when I'm looking at some of that, it's not bad having a team that's maybe a little less experienced in that sense. Newer coaching staffs, and I know I love both these coaching staffs, but younger quarterbacks, newer coaching staffs, it can be a little slippery slope down in some of those situations. So situational stuff, and then like matchup stuff, like we talked about too. Some of it isn't even stats based. It is leaning on, like, we have these numbers. The public's seen this Giants team. We can't stop talking about how good this offense is, and at the same time that this is an incredibly tough opponent compared to the Minnesota defense. And at the same time, the New York Giants defense hasn't been great, but now they have a pass rush that's coming together. Like I said, now they have, some secondary pieces that are playing well. Adoree Jackson is good. They actually did a really good job, because kind of low-key not talked about, Dak Purdy and Daniel Jones But right there, Kirk Cousins was right there with them. Like Kirk Cousins, low-key had a really good day. Maybe one of the best games he's played. It was super clean, and they still limited that team to 24. A team that was coming from behind for big chunks of the game. Like this defense played really well against an offense that we've seen pop off. And they were getting it from all kinds of contributors. It wasn't just Justin Jefferson. So I think this New York Giants offense is overrated and the defense is underrated at this point, which is not where I thought we'd be at this point in the year. Yeah. And good point by Gerald Jones, and we'll point this out in the other NFC game. But yeah, the Giants have played a ton of road games coming down the stretch. It's something to look at when you're betting on teams that you think maybe you're betting on teams to win the conference before the season. You're not going to know a lot, but you will know where games are going to be played. And that was always going to be the problem with Dallas if they weren't able to win the division, is their last 2 games were road games. So the other NFC East team that we're not mentioning here is now playing their 4th consecutive road game, which is just always tough.
Well done. I love that breakdown. I would like to join you on the under. 48.
Yeah, and I guess Harold Williams says too, he leans Giants with the points. Like I think it'll be a lower scoring game. That would be a lean of mine too. If I had to take a side, it would probably be the Giants, even though I'm saying they're probably getting a little too much love in the market. And I should look. My power number on this is like 8. Like it's right there. So it's close.